Hello, everyone. This is Maciej Wilczyński, managing partner and founder of Value Shapes. In today's webinar, we're going to discuss the growth, the pattern of growth, the granularity of growth. We're going to have few people here just to watch and listen and learn about a few things that we have came up with at the organization. Effectively, this chat will be less pricing. In fact, pricing might be a topic which will be visible here, but not necessarily we're going to cover this today. And I know that most of you recognize us from pricing and monetization, but in fact, we also do, we are interested in more things effectively. So one of the things that got me, one of the things that was, I would say, occupying me within the last months was a concept of growth. So how things grow, why things grow, how to boost growth, how to enable growth, how to stop growth, right? We have different aspects of growth. We have sustainable growth, we have exponential growth. Growth might be too fast, might be too slow. We live in an economy where we're living in an economy of more and more and more. So definitely people want more of this growth. So effectively, if you look at that from the perspective of, okay, so how can I use the ageless patterns for growth? But before we begin, I don't have the visibility. I'm using StreamYard today. I don't see people on LinkedIn. So I would appreciate if you write down a comment that you're down there somewhere. So we know that you're here. That would be great. And that I actually have the audience. That would be amazing. Alexandra is here today to help me out with the with answering some comments. Obviously, I can take them later on. So this is, I'm not expecting a huge audience. As I said, mostly people recognize us from pricing and monetization work. But I believe this topic is pretty cool. So let's move on. Okay, so without further ado, I know that people are gathering, but I generally don't like this, gathering. So don't punish the punctual ones. Yeah. So let's go through the presentation, how it works. We call it granularity of growth, but we also call it the algebra of growth. So I believe there are some ageless patterns on how the things grow or they don't grow effectively, and I will show you some equation. This conversation might be slightly philosophical for some, might be slightly connected to meta concepts, not necessarily, get more leads, get more sales, increase prices, very, meaty stuff. I believe this is slightly more intellectual. And also, I believe LinkedIn needs this. So why not, right? Because if you understand the thing also kind of somewhat academically, you can use them for the practice. So the examples and the chat and the storylining from this will be coming from 5 different areas. There will be economics and history. There will be business, private life, my own and people I know, nature, and society and world. So basically, coming from the fact that growth is everywhere, this is where we're having. So, what is growth? So obviously, people write a word to Google and they try to understand, maybe now to the chat GPT or Claude or any AI platform, trying to figure out, okay, so what is growth and what growth isn't, in this sense. So growth, generally, this is something that you need to remember. There are like 2 important items here. So first is like the process of increasing in size, right? So we have something that was this and then it goes like this. Also, it has to come in time, right? So growth, you have point of T0 and point T1. So don't expect growth to come immediately, right? So there's always a certain increase and certain time. So it already gives us two important contributions on this kind of like XY axis. You need certain quantity or size or volume or whatever versus the time. And this is important because this is where what we understand that okay, so it is all about these two dimensions. It's interesting and it's quite funny that even a word growth had its own growth and decline. So these are the mentions of word growth in books since 1980s. Sorry, from 1800s. And we were writing about growth until we decided to stop writing about growth. So the penetration of the growth word was also quite popular. So there's always a growth and a decline, even for the word growth. Obviously, you know this, like the population grows, and in time we also know that there will be a decrease in population. You might not be aware of it. We have about 8 billion people in the world, but it's not that this population will grow exponentially. This growth will stop, and we'll talk about few patterns of growth that are also happening. So growth patterns are everywhere. Like the economies grow, for instance. Here you see the growth of the economies between 1989 and 2023. Top 20 economies, and Poland, in fact, is the only current EU country that managed to increase in size this substantially. Also look at the base from where they're starting from. So this growth is truly impressive. But also like some European countries like Turkey or they are also visible here. So obviously the growth also comes in the economic terms, and I believe this is something that we all understand. Well, sometimes growth, well, some of them we remember slightly too much. This is like coronavirus cases, some slow ups and downs, right? So this kind of and if you look at that from the perspective, remember when the cases were like increasing and we were looking at them from the there's also constantly increasing, but if you zoom out, then you see that it was like a certain parabolic effect that happened if you flatline this. So we also need to keep in mind that not necessarily that we are kind of, we are always close to growth, and sometimes we think that the moment we look at them, they are not necessarily that drastic in a longer perspective. Well, this is the chart from like yesterday. So this is Nvidia revenue, like absolutely outstanding. The CAGR of 66%. So an average B series startup has this trajectory, and they are quite mature company. So this AI hype is really huge, and we'll see how it will flatline. It will definitely flatline in few years. It can't go forever, but as for now, at this moment, we need to understand that we are in this pre-hype moment. So the growth patterns are everywhere, right? And depending on what you look at, and they're not the same. So the first one, this is like the linear growth, so it can go like this, right? So with every increase in like basically it goes with an every x, the y also increases. That is the exponential growth, right? So this is where we see the this is something that we would expect again from Nvidia type of thing that is happening. We have the flat line of growth, so the logarithmic one, so that goes very high very quickly, and then it kind of maintains at the same level. There's the logit growth, which is like the classical S curve. So it starts smoothly, and then it goes up and becomes a natural phenomenon. So the S curves, this is something that, for instance, happens for authors or of books, or for popular code repositories on GitHub, that they are small, small, small until they are like go bump, and then they immediately become the new standard. Interesting one is the noise, silence, and growth. So kind of like the U shape, right? Which is effectively starts from, hey, there's something buzzing in, it goes down and then goes up. So this is somewhat what happened. So if you compare the exponential growth and this one, this is what kind of happened with the AI. We have the ephemerid growth, which is kind of the maturity. So you have a growth and decline, so a certain peaking point. Some growths are like cycled growths, right? So even if you look at the economy in cycles, this is where we are at. And obviously something that quite well as people from the technology, which is like hype cycle, Gartner cycle, which is like this. This is where we potentially stand currently at. We're still at the beginning of the hype cycle within the AI. Some people say that we are already maturing. No, we're not. We're at the beginning of the hype cycle. Some people are, obviously there are some people who will like stop this growth. Some people are like super into it, as with every next pattern. It was the same with the with exploring new lands in the 15th century. It is exactly in 16th century. It's exactly the same as discovering new lands in the North America. It's exactly the same as gold rush in California, oil fields, and it was the same with Bitcoin. It will be the same with the technologies, internet, Bitcoin, AI. All of them go through the same cycles. The thing is, we don't necessarily know, and we cannot predict the future where we are at. But what we know and what we need to prepare for ourselves for is that these things might stop. These things might not look that in the longer perspective. And honestly, there has never been a growth phenomenon that haven't flatlined in the whole history of mankind. And I will also show you some patterns for it. So, well, all these thoughts led me to a simplified growth equation, which more or less looks like this. Uh, Obviously, I'm just kidding. It's not simplified. Uh, but in fact, I managed to get some kind of like easy algebraic formula, which is sometimes like a poor coaching. But this framework, I believe, serves me as a founder of value ships. This is how I coach my people. This is how I coach my clients. This is what we do to also understand our ability to grow further. And it's a certain simplification of how the world looks like, but always keep in mind that model is a this is a model and simplified version of the reality. So my simplified algebra of growth and the framework I use for growth is consisting of 5 items. So the first is context and momentum. So something that you don't necessarily have control of, and something that I will talk about slightly later on. But this is the kind of like the K factor, the proportionality constant. So the K factor, where you are, in which moment you are, something that you don't necessarily have the control how this looks like, but you choose this K factor. But let's leave this for now. There's like fuel, resources, and inputs. So in order to boost growth, you need to get fuel. To You need to put fuel, right? And this is the first thing. Second thing, you need to multiply it by time. So growth needs time, as we said slightly earlier. So if you add fuel, you add growth, then, but there are some limitations. There are some elements that divide this growth. So there are some constraints, so limitations and bottlenecks that you face, and challenges and difficulties. These are not the same things, because one are something that you need to avoid, and some of them are the ones that you need to add in a certain manner to boost this growth, right? So growth never happens without friction, and this is something that you need to remember. And I will talk that in a second. So within this like next sections, I will be basically going one by one, explaining my logic of this framework, how it works, and hopefully this will be this will be useful to you in the long run. So anyone who did some pizza pie or focaccia or whatever, or any other dough, effectively understands how sourdough works, right? So you need to add either lot of time and slow fermentation in the fridge or whatever, but also if you want to boost this growth, you need to add sugar, which they consume, and then your dough expands quite fast, right? So you can add sugar, and this is how it works. I believe this is a good metaphor, or how fuel works for in most cases. In order to boost growth, you need to add fuel. And honestly, like, this is something that we all know. Well, our economy also consumes the raw materials and the changes in the type of energy that it requires to grow. So you need to have this Mother Earth pillaging machines from Transformers to get the coal and to effectively um, get and in the meantime get the energy. So also there's this theory that the growth comes in whenever and there's this kind of from the energy theory that the growth comes in whenever our civilization change the fuel. And if you look at that from the business perspective, it's somewhat the same with the startups. So no one adds so much fuel like a good founder, right? So there's this kind of founder mode, that founder-led companies outperform the rest. This is something that we know. And the good founder adds more fuel, adds more energy, effectively more caloric intake to the overall organization. This is great. This is in the growth stage. Again, you see what is the pattern that is happening. But what if the previous fuel depletes? What if the growth depletes? Well, then we need to change it for the different one. So the founder-led companies are great in the good times when there is like the bull market. This is great times. However, when we're going into the more bearish market, we also know that this founder-led companies not necessarily do that great, especially if you look at the free cash flow and the margins that are created by these companies. Usually founders push for growth. If the growth stops, then they spend even more, and this is the good moment in which you might require to have a manager. So effectively you replace one fuel for the other one, right? You replace the founder for the cash equivalent of non-managers. So this is how you should be looking at your business at the same time. So my marketing doesn't drive more leads. Maybe we can add more fuel by putting the higher budgets in, but maybe the fuel is in the not the right team. Maybe if we have the bad sales teams, we also need to change the input that is happening. And this kind of input output approach that is a part of Amazon-like organization, this is the key here. You need to focus on the inputs in order to get the outputs, especially if you're setting the KPIs. So it's always good to have this kind of lag and leading measure that is happening. One thing is something that we can control of and something that we don't. And to be completely honest with you, we as people driving organizations, we have control over our fuel. And in business life, in also in our private life. Well, Scott Galloway created this very cool algebra of, if we want to stay fit, you need to spend more time sweating than you see other people sweating, right? So if I watch football but don't play this football, I don't necessarily will be fit. If I only hear stories about great travels and I don't do them for myself, there is a highly limited probability that I will, grow in this direction. So this is kind of like practice versus being active versus passive. This is exactly the same case. And if you look at that from the perspective of the kind of longevity approach, the more good fuel you put yourself now compounds for later in the long run. So in other words, it's good to start your growth with the right inputs. Well, this book Outlive, probably most of you heard of it. Pretty cool one. But let me show you some examples of it. So basically you can get few more years of life gained with the weekly physical activity. In fact, if you have a strong physical activity, you can increase your life by 3x. It doesn't necessarily mean that you'll live to 100 years. It rather means that you can get kind of up to the 4 years of life on top, statistically speaking, if you exercise more. But what is interesting, as you see, even this growth has a certain flat line. So there is a certain so you get about 80% of the 75% of the outcomes by doing only 10 hours of the activity. You don't necessarily need to exercise for 30 hours, which is great news for most of us. I think 3 years for 10 hours of activity is a strong trade-off that most of us can pretty much take. So this would be about fuel. So next one, we're moving to time. Time is effectively well, basically, you always need time to build something. Even if you talk about modern empires, right? Look at USA was founded in the 1800s, effectively. Like, I know that slightly earlier, but if you look at the GDP growth and how it looks like, it was founded, then it flatlined for a moment and boosted afterwards. So you need time to fund something. Similarly, if you look at China, it takes time to build a civilization, to build anything, and it is exactly the same for companies. In fact, sometimes growth and decline, well, it takes similar amount of time, and also you have some leading indicator that this growth will decline. So this yellow coins that you see, this is the silver content in the effectively in the Roman coins. And it's interesting that even already in like mid hundreds, there were like authors writing about that if we suppress the level, the effective level of coin within the in the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire will fall. In other words, people already saw this decline before it actually happened. So they somewhat lived in the future. So what it tells us is that we know that this will happen. We don't necessarily know when. And there are some indicators regarding the demographics, regarding the the economy. Actually, we'll get into Nassim Taleb example in a second, but this is exactly what we're talking about here. So you need to remember that some indicators in time show us that the growth might decline, and these are the fundamentals of your organization. Very simple example of, for instance, us at Value Ships. So the current model that we're facing, Value Ships, is project based. So we do pricing projects. These are like 12 to 16 week studies, and then we kind of move to the next client. So we very rarely do implementations. Like, we do them, but we would love to. Obviously, I would love to do more of them. So if we're not doing the implementations, we are constantly in the acquisition mode, right? We're acquiring new customers, we work for them, and we basically get to the next customers. Like, a lot of great studies, a lot of speed, a lot of impact generated. That's great, but can you imagine? And we're obviously moving up in the expensiveness of deals that we're doing, and unfortunately, there might be a moment in which, statistically speaking, our pipeline might deplete. Like 5 deals. Out of these 5 deals, something doesn't go through legal. There are some strategic changes in the organization, and then we're done. So then our whole cash flow goes down, and we have a problem. So the thing is, I, as an owner, I already know that such risk might happen, because I know that the fundamentals are not right. Therefore, I'm trying to do something with it. So it will take time, and I'm kind of hoping for addressing this risk. And this is the learning that you might want to do as well. Remember ephemerate. Remember Clubhouse, there was things like this in COVID. Well, this exploded, and then within like few months it literally died. So whenever you see a spike like this, expect this. You might expect it to fall down. This is kind of like the stock market situation. But also keep in mind that investments, so to say, they also like time. So if you put a dollar into $1,000 into Apple, you'll be a very rich person nowadays. But also, instead of purchasing every new iPhone every time you get one, you have purchased a new Apple stock. You would be even richer. So effectively, this is something that we need to remember about the investments. Obviously, spotting the right investment occasions is completely different. But what I like to remind myself and also my employees, like, growth takes time. Also keep in mind that the compounding effect always works both ways. So here on this chart, you can see that if America had 1 percentage point lower growth per quarter since 1980s, it would be about as poor as Mexico today. Well, the question is, where would Mexico be? But growth is this is the good insight that the growth is the most precious quantity in the world, and without it, most of us would simply not exist. So our whole society and civilization is created for growth, and the compounding effect always works in both ways. So if I stop doing something and I see some decline, this decline will work in the same way as my increase in time, right? So we also need to remember that 1% being 1% better every day and versus being 1% lower every day in time will definitely have an impact on our business. A good example are slow erosions of the customer satisfaction, or NPS scores, or Google reviews. So if you see that on average every month or every quarter your average Google review scores are worse, there is a high indication that something is going wrong with your business, and that in like few years you'll be out of business. So I don't know if it'll be 2 years, 3 years, maybe 10 years, but there you basically increase the probability substantially. So you need to keep in mind. And obviously this decline happens much faster in some situations like restaurants, right? Some bad reviews for restaurants can kill the entire business, and for some businesses it takes much longer, but still this is the compounding effect we are here. So and also to all entrepreneurs and all the people trying to fight on the arena, what I like to say is, like, give yourself time, right? So in fact, these older entrepreneurs are more likely to succeed. In fact, they are 2 times more likely to succeed than the younger ones. What I also like about this chart is, like, still the probability of success is about 0.2% versus 0.1%. So don't necessarily high anyway, but still, we know that the older you are, the more likely you're going to make good decisions. So this is kind of ego play that is happening, and like when you see, like, for every Mark Zuckerberg building Facebook, there are 1,000 others people who build their businesses at the age of 40 or 50 or even 60s. So don't compare yourself. Don't do this. And this is something that always I try to remind myself as well. Well, similarly, like the average succession, don't mistake it for the awesome HBO show. But average succession, you guessed it, also takes time, depending on the industry. So it is very hard to exit within less than 5 to 6 years from establishing. This is average, right? This is average. So we have some quick exits as well, but also we have some longer ones. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to get to the median, to the full data set, but basically you can expect even 7 to 8 years of constant crunching before you manage to exit. So if you're 30, you can exit within the age of 38 or even 40, so a decade. So it's something that we don't necessarily plan within the horizon. People are really bad in telling what they'll do in 10 years. 10 years is effectively a lot of life. But just looking at the statistics allow you to kind of set the right tone, set yourself into the right moment in which basically allows you to put some things into perspective. Well, what I like about time and about the concept of time, you may say that our economy, grew exponentially in the last 21 centuries, right? It was flat until it boomed in the Industrial Revolution. Well, yes, but if we zoom in between Industrial Revolution and 2018, it somewhat starts at the moment. It's still like this hockey stick, but someone starts to get more linear after a moment, right? It's the kind of gets more linear. Okay, let's zoom in here. Well, it's definitely linear, right? Right now, if you make a trend line, okay, this is the last 60 years. Sure, let's go. Okay, so the last 20 years, 25 years is effectively what? What is happening within the last? What is happening that within the last few years, 30 years, we can say that we have the flatlining of growth, right? And what I like about this example is that this is not the only trend like this. Like 25 minutes ago, I've told you that there has never been a phenomenon in the history in which the growth didn't flatline in time after looking at a certain perspective. So people you remember these stories when people were saying, "Hey, can you imagine where we'll be going with this whole aviation?" Or that will be, imagine how life will look like in the future, like we're supposed to have flying cars and we have TikTok, right? So first of all, we are super bad in predicting the future, and secondly, we know that has never been a phenomenon that outlived the trajectory forever. So every phenomena that we see will flatline. Sorry, NVIDIA, you will also flatline. And I understand that they're probably pretty fine with flatlining, after creating a trillion of dollar worth company, but still we need to remember that certain aspects will flatten. So understanding these trajectories is super helpful whenever spotting the right trends, spotting the moments within the organization, and also effectively recognizing whenever we have a certain spike effect or we have some kind of longer trajectory that is happening. So spotting the extremes versus the stable patterns of growth, right? So how growth appears mostly depends on the moment you look at it, right? So something that may be light speed for you at certain moment in like a month or two will be okay-ish, right? So something to remember, something that I like to remind to people. Well, moving on to constraints, this is a very cool example. Is like there was this figure in movies. There was a woman, in the books there was a guy, but he she pronouns. He said that Liet Kynes in Dune said that the growth is limited by the necessity which is present in the least amount, and naturally the least favorable condition controls the growth rate. So what it means effectively, this is the Libby's law, and it started from that the yield of plants is limited by the element that is least available in the quantity. In normal words, in the kind of being down to earth, if I have selenium, potassium, calcium at, let's say, 1,000 units capacity, so these elements give me the yield of 1,000 units of whatever crop, but at the same time I have magnesium giving me the capacity of like 500 units instead of 1,000. So 3 elements would give me 1,000. I have enough of them to give me 1,000, and I have one that gives 500. Well, I will have a crop of 500. Everyone who played Age of Empires or any real-time strategy game understands that if you don't have one particular resource, your growth in this direction will be limited. So basically, this is the thing that is critical. So it goes us to the business examples. If I don't have enough leads so my sales team can perform, right, I obviously can't grow faster. Similarly, if my recruitment processes are not good enough, I can't grow faster. If I don't have enough team, if my overall billability is too low, I need to work on that. So the thing is, like, Liebig's law is a phenomenon. It's an actual law that happens, and I think is very, 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 very useful. At the same time, there is a way of fighting with it. So there's this theory of constraints. So theory of constraints is kind of similar, but in the sense that there are certain bottlenecks of growth and we need to overcome them, right? So we either need to identify the constraints. This is the first thing. We need to exploit it, so go full max on it, and either subordinate the system or elevate this constraint. In other words, like change it, remove it. Being super precise, you need to crush your constraints like ruthlessly and mercilessly. A very good example is, we want to do international expansion to Germany. Well, but no one speaks German in our organization. Okay, great. So probably we can do it. This is the constraint. And we can either learn German or we can hire someone with the German speaking capability. So this is effectively a way of thinking of constraints. Well, we don't necessarily know how to grow. Well, let's buy this knowledge. Let's purchase these skills either via acquisition, like employment, either via consulting, or just read everything that is available on that matter, which is something that I believe makes a lot of sense. But identifying constraints is, I believe, the most important job of a manager. Like, being completely honest, if you manage to identify constraints and destroy them, you're a good manager. So this is something that I believe is a fundamental aspect. I like to explain this, that this is something that how medieval cities also worked. They grew to the moment in which they had city walls, and then later their overall population growth was also limited by these walls, right? By this constraint that they have built. The population density within these walls increased. Whenever the population size increased too much, there were either fires or famines or epidemics or whatever different reasons. So there is this theory that the medieval cities expanded to the limit of their walls, which is actually quite interesting. But don't be a medieval city, right? Don't put yourselves walls that will limit you in the long run. Almost last but not least is friction. So whenever constraints are something that we need to crush mercilessly, friction is something that is essential to make fire, right? So you need to have friction. You need to have a certain effort in the process in order to make fire. So it's all about like these people, who get Bitcoin. So people who win lottery tickets. This is the phenomenon that if you manage to get rich effortlessly, it's also a very high probability of you losing this wealth very quickly as well. So effectively, effort is critical. Effort is all that matters. You can, build a muscle mass with steroids, but it's not necessarily sustainable. So friction is about making your model somewhat anti-fragile. And friction is important, even if it's super turbulent friction. In this case, there's a population of Tokyo after the Second World War turbulences, right? So it was growing at certain rate, but the decline in the population managed to boost it after post-war economic growth. And even if you look at the shapes of trajectories, they are like this. And this is why the turbulences also look like this. Obviously, if you look at, we didn't decrease the overall baseline that much. The overall baseline decreased for like it decreased 2 times, but still we came back to the same levels within like 15 years. So the growth was double the rate. Of course, there are more cities like this. See Warsaw, that was literally evaporated by Germans during the Second World War, and after all, the city rebuilt and is one of the most modern capital cities in the Europe. And in fact, it was built in a completely different manner, also removed from the obstacles and kind of architectural boundaries that were on the that were before. This is exactly the same as Paris during as Paris did, like removing the medieval part of Paris, and which is a friction process, not a frictionless process, removing the medieval parts and then expanding into one of the biggest cities in the world. So this is the general concept, that you require friction. From the purely personal perspective, this is comfort zone, right? You can hate it, but you need to embrace it. So there's this concept like that you feel safe and in control. But if you manage to, overcome the fear zone, you get into the friction. You get into, okay, this is not comfortable. This is not easy for me, but I'll do it nevertheless. And this is where you move into the growth zone. So personally, this is exactly the same moment. Any runners here? If you're a runner, this is exactly the same. If you need to increase the trainings, right? But at the same time, you can't push yourself too hard because it can limit your kind of sustainable growth, right? So this is the phenomenon that no pain, no gain type of situation, and I believe this actually works for most people. And I think bodybuilding, exercising in general, but also learning, all these people who basically try to learn new words via Duolingo but never really have a chance to have a real conversation in this language, right? This is exactly this type of situation. I believe that Nassim Taleb has this anti-fragile approach, right? That let's just compare two industries. One is the aviation industry, and second is banking. So in the aviation industry, whenever something happens, we try to investigate this accident so it never happens, right? And with every single, well, let's just go this way, for every person dying in the accident, there are more people flying without any accident. In other words, miles flew without any accident increases in time because of the anti-fragility in the process, that we try to remove any potential obstacle within the aviation industry, contrarian to the banking system, in which with every crisis, every situation created by the banking system, the system becomes even more fragile in the long run. See, like Credit Suisse. Hello to you guys, right? So this is exactly this pattern. And the last thing that I wanted to touch base is context and momentum. As I've told you, this is not something that you have control of, how it works, but you have control if you're in this. So I believe that where you play matters more than how you play. So on this chart, you have average annual economic profit of different verticals within the global economy. And in fact, software economy, look how tiny, how narrow this is. Software sector create more economic value than any other sector in the world, only by having like this small subset of firms. In other words, you don't necessarily need to be super smart if you work in the IT software sector. So you probably have seen this, life of a product manager at Apple TikToks, right? You don't necessarily need to be smart as long as you work in the tech, right? So where I come from here is you can change the context in which you are. You can change the context in many ways. So you can change the context either via moving vertical. So did everything to move from production to IT. I did everything to move from banking to IT, or have some connection to the fintech industry, for instance, to have this innovation level play. I don't. If I want to move, I don't want to work in the old school, industrial economy. I want to work in the new digital tech. So this is kind of, again, about, for instance, even the Rust Belt in the United States, or old industrial areas in Europe, like we have in Silesia. And obviously, I'm not blaming the people who work there, but basically this is who work there, but this is the context, right? No one, and I'm kind of actually blame politicians for that, no one understood the context and the slow decline of what will happen within the economy, and how the certain forces shape, so they can anticipate it, right? So this is exactly the same thing. Similarly, if you want to grow fast and if you want to earn more, move to Dubai, right? I'm not saying this is the perfect place to live, and I have like many strong opinions about Dubai, but what I believe is important is that, yes, this is one of the fastest growing cities in the world, and actually the biggest economical pivot that is happening in the 21st century. And obviously for us software people, this is exactly the same concept. Is like, move to the Bay if you want to do big business, right? In the Bay you can get funded with a pitch deck. In Europe you need to have an actual MVP that works. So this is a slight slight difference of what you can do, right? So why we mention that is that the certain context move faster than the others, but also you can spot the right context. So let's talk about Priceline a little bit. So Priceline, per like before acquisition of Booking.com, grew at 1% rate. They were losing market share. They lacked international expansion. They were only in US. Their technology was bad, and definitely they were like far less innovative than Booking. But they had this one resource, the fuel that they had was cash, and they understood that time was not in their favor, because they were literally losing. The constraints that they saw, the technological limitations, were not really possible to overcome. And the market was changing in a totally different dimension, so the friction was too hard. But what they did is like they spot the moment, and they changed the context and momentum by purchasing Booking. And with purchase of Booking.com, which is like now the key vehicle of Priceline, the whole new story began, right? So they managed to switch the context, and there are many acquisitions like this, many successful. Like, for every successful story, there are obviously 100 that didn't make it. But this is the story of Nokia. This is the story of Kodak. This is the story of Pony Express in the United States. Well, it seems that it might be the story of Google within the OpenAI. Who knows? So this might be interesting. In the private life, last but not least, is like, basically, if you want to be fit, surround yourself with fit people, right? So again, the context in which whom you surround yourself with is essential. So if you're the smartest guy in the room, you are in the wrong room, right? So this is something that usually explains the phenomenon why tech people hang out with other tech people, why we hang up with people who are like us, because we basically try to we move to the similar clusters. But we can influence. Again, we don't influence the clusters themselves, but we influence the our behavior. So what I like to say is like, while statistics and population are not necessarily the certain movements en masse are maybe not unpredictable, but we don't have control over them. But we as me as a person, I am a variable, and as this variable I have full control over my variable, right? So I don't necessarily have control of where I am, how was I born, where I was born. I The luck is 50-60% of our success in life, but this 40 to 50% of success is effectively the move between one context versus the other, and we can definitely influence and supercharge our growth on that. So this whole came from me reading different stuff and different books. Not only them, but I believe they are like quite good. Obviously there's like a lot to read, and I believe they are like probably more great books on the concept of growth or how it works. But basically I believe this is a good beginning, and I strongly recommend to for you to go further through this rabbit hole, go down this rabbit hole, because it's super fascinating and interesting. And me personally, this helped me develop my own framework of looking at things, and this is why I wanted to share it. I'm not expecting this to have a mass audience because this is quite um, complicated in the matter. But for me personally, this was fun, and I believe, and I hope you also had some of them. So to sum up, my simplified algebra is, you need to pick the right context, you need to choose the good fuel, you need to give yourself time, crush the bottlenecks, and apply controllable friction. And this, therefore, you can grow your business, your organization, and you personally. So thank you for having me here. Thank you for the time. We'll wait for like 2 minutes, 2-3 minutes for the comments, and I will try to answer them. Also, you can DM me on LinkedIn or my email at maciej@valueships.com. And yeah, I'm waiting for if there are any comments. I will like stay for like minute or two. If not, I'll be uh, basically going back to work. Okay, I think that there are like no questions. So thank you for the for this webinar, and good luck in your growth journey.